Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our entitled parents. In today's episode, Karen crashed into my Jeep and expects me to pay her cash for her damages because her children will starve if she pays to fix her car. Karen wants to sue me now over the post from the Jeep accident. My abusive grandmother made sure I stayed fat, so she could make fun of me for being fat. My entitled grandmother stole my new clothes and exchanged them for steel utensils. So I gave away her utensils. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Karen crashed into my Jeep and expects me to pay her cash for her damages because her children will starve if she pays to fix her car. So some backstory: I own a Jeep, #JeepLife, fully built, lift kit, D bumpers, the whole shebang. So one day I'm coming home from work, it's a summer day, the roof is off and I'm having some open top fun. Stop at a red light and suddenly screech bang. I drive forward slightly and go back to assess the damage, and lo and behold, it's a Mercedes C-Class, new one on that as well. Completely destroyed from the front, and my beautiful Jeep had no damage apart from a few scratches. I went to check on the passenger of the Merc. Got them out, luckily she was unharmed. These Mercs are definitely safe. Under a minute after she's out of the car, she starts screaming about how I wrecked her car. I told her calmly that she was the one who rammed into me. I think she understood how my hitting her would be impossible. I offered to share our insurance details because I knew that Mercedes damage doesn't come cheap. But she said she didn't have insurance. She insisted that I pay her $10,000 cash. How she got this number? I don't know. I said that was just plain wrong, as 1. She hit me. 2. It's her fault for not having insurance. She then went on a ramble on how her kids needed the money and they had no money at the time, and now her kids will have to starve because she will have to pay to fix her car, and how it will all be my fault when they are on the street tomorrow. Yeah, on the street with a Mercedes, my ass. That is why you should have insurance. But no, she said that she would call the cops if I didn't pay her. I refused, as this is just dumb, so then she called the cops. Yeah. Cops came, assessed the damage and asked us what happened, and she said, and I quote, "He backed into me at full speed on a red light, SMH." Then they asked me what happened and I told them. And it became a he said she said situation. Luckily a shopkeeper was there and saw the whole thing and even captured it on a surveillance camera. Needless to say, I came out on top. Cops got her for reckless driving and driving without insurance. She then started yelling at the cops about how they would just let a criminal get away. They explained that I did nothing wrong and that they now had video evidence. The partner of the cop came to me and told me if I could drive I can leave, so I got in my Jeep and left. Never want to have a Karen experience again, not worth it. P.S. If you have a lifted Jeep with heavy-duty bumpers, a Mercedes can't do much damage. I've seen so many lifted monstrosities of Jeeps in good old Britain, and I kid you not, I saw a truck rear-end one. The Jeep was unscathed. The truck? Bumper falling off. Jeeps are tough AF and can kick ass off-road. Me and my mate would take his dad's Jeep off-roading while I ran alongside on my Yamaha dirt bike, forgot model, and that Jeep would bounce up and down and I would barely keep up. It was a Wrangler Rubicon. We loved that thing. He had to sell it though, as they were moving countries for reasons I won't go into. I once saw a small SUV ram full force into the back of a Jeep with an enclosed extra wheel. They only had minor cosmetic damage. The SUV was totaled with a completely smashed front end. This is why every action movie uses a Jeep for collisions. They can take a real beating. How on earth could you back up on someone at full speed or so bad it crunched her whole front? LOL, at least she tried. He backed into me with his front bumper. I would have tried to go after her for your scratches anyways. When I had a Durango, a girl ran into me, her bumper came completely off and all I had was scratches. Luckily she and I both had insurance, but it was a $1,200 fix, which is a lot for a retail worker, and I wasn't going to drive around with damage that somebody else caused. I'm sure your Jeep is way better than my crap Durango, so I just hope you restored to original beauty. Anytime a parent threatens, but if I have to pay this I won't be able to feed me kids, the correct response is, I understand you're unable to feed your children, so I will be reporting this to CPS. Karen wants to sue me now over the post from the Jeep accident. So Karen read my post, who knew? I certainly didn't. I just received a direct message from Karen in all caps as expected. She basically said that how I already destroyed her car and left her penniless and her children starving. I'm so over this, and now she wants me to take down the post because it defaces her. She said, and I quote, "You know this is a legal right, you have no right to talk like this about me, you already wrecked my CR that I have to pay out of pocket now for. If you don't take this down immediately I will report you and sue you for attacking me." I explained to her that neither was her real name mentioned nor the place where this happened, the only thing mentioned was her car and how she was being a big asshole. But no, she threatened to sue me for defacing her beautiful reputation. How? So yeah, that happened. I advised her against this, but she said that she had my license plate number and if this post is not gone by tomorrow I will be receiving some papers. I am not worried at all, she doesn't have a case as I didn't mention anywhere her name or any revealing info. At all. But if there is anything I missed that can cause me a problem, please tell me, as I really don't want to take a wrong step. P.S. For all the ones asking, yeah, the Wrangler and I are fine, it was built to take a punishment and so was I. I also contacted the shopkeeper who has agreed to pass me the recording. Her pursuing a lawsuit would be a total waste of time and money. This would never go to court. LOL. I love that Karen was able to identify her own special crazy in a completely anonymous Reddit post. Her pursuing a lawsuit would be a complete waste of her time. It would also actually identify her as the crazy person who did this, since she would have to use her actual name. My abusive grandmother made sure I stayed fat, so she could make fun of me for being fat. My mother passed away when I was a year and a half old. From then on till I was around 11, my care was entrusted entirely to my grandmother. That vile knew she had power over a defenseless little girl and decided to abuse the hell out of it for her own amusement. My dad at the time was going through some legal and financial struggles. He married my stepmother when I was 4. But my grandmother wouldn't let her cook for me. She threw tantrums and begged my dad to let her remain in charge of every aspect of my life. We're Indians, and in our culture it's customary for elderly parents to stay with their adult children. So there was no escape for me. My stepmom would cook for my dad, stepbrother and herself, and my grandmother would cook for herself and me. The food she made for on a daily basis is something no responsible caregiver would allow a child to consume regularly. She cooked deep-fried, fatty foods along with overly sweetened desserts. I hardly ever got to eat fresh veggies or fruits. For my school lunch she gave me the same. On more than one occasion, my teachers expressed concern over what I was eating. When my dad brought this up with her, she would put on an Oscar-worthy performance and would cry about how I was her baby girl, how she was doing the best she could, and how dare my father suggest that she wanted anything less than the best for me. My dad, at the time, was pretty spineless. So he decided to let her do as she pleased in order to maintain peace in our home. As expected, I began to balloon up. By the time I was 8, I was already morbidly obese for my age. I couldn't run without running out of breath after a short distance. As I wasn't getting the required nutrients, only fried junk, I was also anemic. I looked huge but was actually quite weak. And of course, with my obesity came the ruthless bullying from my peers. I had no friends and bullies found me irresistible. My self-esteem was as low as it could be. I also had a stutter at the time, so you can imagine how much fun school must have been. My grandmother, of course, placed the entire blame on me. She told almost every day that I was a fat and disgusting freak. That my stutter was a punishment from God. That I would never have friends. Along with many other horrible things that one can say to break a child. My dad never intervened. His marriage to my stepmom was suffering. Grandma made a huge contribution to that mess too. For about a year, my stepmom actually took my stepbrother and moved back in with her parents. Can't say I blame her. As I got older, I got fatter. And angrier. At age 13, I was a ball of rage on legs. I began to realize what my grandmother had done to me. I knew what she had been stuffing me with for years was what made me obese. I had now taken to hitting her when she would mock me. I would punch her, kick her, and even drop constant reminders that her husband had left her for her sister. She would bawl about how cruel I was and I'd get punished. I began to refuse the food that she would cook and thus would cause her to bawl some more. My dad too had begun to realize that my health would deteriorate to the point of no return if I kept consuming my grandmother's slow poison. He always reprimanded me very strictly for my violent outbursts, but he did support my efforts to live a healthier lifestyle. However, losing all that weight was no easy task. I struggled for years and finally, as I entered my early 20s, I was at a normal weight. Today, I'm superbly fit. I run, I practice yoga and Kalaripayattu, an ancient Indian form of martial arts. I can honestly say that I'm in love with my body. I'm impressed that you didn't let her behavior be an excuse for you to continue that lifestyle. So many people throw their hands up and say, "Can't help it, it's how I was raised." You're an inspiration. This is a perfect example that not all grandmothers are angels fallen from the sky. My mom did the same. She'd always give me tons of junk food all the time. We had a clean the plate rule where I would be verbally berated for not finishing my meal. All the while she would moo at me while I ate, say things like, "Do you really need that ice cream?" After fixing me a bowl. She would give me her hand-me-downs because I was so fat I could fit into her adult clothes in 5th grade. She would pick on me with her students/my classmates. One of them told me my prom dress wasn't flattering in front of her during prom and she agreed and said I looked lumpy. Now I'm 26 with a food addiction, but I got my weight under control and went from 5 pounds away from obesity to a healthy BMI of 18. Meanwhile, she's put on weight as she's aged. Now she makes jokes about how skinny I am, how I disappear when I turn sideways. She yelled at me when I told her I didn't want candy at the holidays because I used to love that tradition. Literally yelled. I almost just left and went home. So when I went for Thanksgiving dinner and she made things super awkward during dinner by trying to force me to eat more. My entitled grandmother stole my new clothes and exchanged them for steel utensils. So I gave away her utensils. I'm Indian and in my country, till a few years ago, you could get steel utensils from door-to-door vendors in exchange for clothes. This barter system still exists in villages and some small towns. My grandmother, being the insane hoarder that she was, loved getting utensils in this manner. Utensils that no one else was allowed to touch, that she would never use and would only gather dust in her room. Anytime my stepmom or my dad tried to donate our old clothes to charity, she would throw a hissy fit. She'd collect all the clothes we weren't going to wear anymore so she could exchange them for pots and pans. At times she would take it a step further and demand clothes that we were still going to wear. She would insist that they don't fit us anymore, or some other bullshit argument to get us to hand them over. Seriously, we had to sometimes fight her to keep our clothes. Oh, but she never, gave away her own clothes. She only took garments from others, namely me, my dad, my stepmom and my stepbrother. When I was around 21, I had just lost a lot of weight and needed new clothes. Yes, I lived with my parents. In India, you can't afford to live independently unless you have a well-paying job and I was in college at that time, so one day I went to a local store's clearance sale and bought a bunch of new threads. I left them on my bed and went off to a friend's place. When I returned a few hours later, my new clothes were gone. My dad, stepmom and brother weren't home, so I figured out instantly who must have taken them. I confronted the grandmonster and asked what she'd done with my clothes. She was sitting on her bed admiring her latest haul of pots and pans. Without even looking up, she told me my clothes were ugly and too westernized. and that she did the right thing by exchanging them for something useful. As you can imagine, I lost my temper. I yelled, cursed at her, called her every name in the book. And she had the audacity to actually defend her actions. That evening, there was a major showdown in our home. I was still livid and asked my dad exactly how long we were going to put up with her abuse. My stepmother and I don't get along, but when one of us was up against Grand Monster, the other always lent her support. This was no different. My stepmother agreed with me wholeheartedly. My dad told Grand Monster that she was now forbidden from entering my room without my prior permission. She started to fake cry and said we were all being so cruel to her. My dad later came to my room and said he would make it up to me and buy me new clothes. I, of course, was still livid. And I wasn't about to let she have this victory. My grandmother needed sleeping pills to fall asleep. She took them even during the day. And she slept like the dead. A few days later, I snuck into her room during her afternoon nap. I opened her utensils trunk, yes, she had a whole trunk full of them, and took out a whole bunch of her beloved pots, glasses, plates, etc. I shut the lid quietly and exited. I went straight to an old age shelter that was nearby. I donated the utensils and earned the joy of giving and the taste of sweet, sweet revenge. I didn't tell anyone what I had done and just waited for Grand Monster to discover her loss. Which she did, just a few days later. It happened in the evening. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when I heard her ear-piercing wailings about how someone had stolen from her utensils chest. A satisfied smile spread across my face. My dad called me into grandmother's room and asked if I knew anything about the missing utensils. I admitted that I had taken and donated them. Grand Monster looked like her head would explode. I calmly told her I had done the right thing because those utensils were ugly and that the shelter needed them more. And clearly if she could come into my room and tage my things without asking, I could jolly well do the same. I think my dad was upset with me but really had nothing to say to me. He spent the next hour or so trying to calm his mother down. I slept so well that night. When Grand Monster died a few years later, the first of her belongings that we got rid of were those utensils. That was hardcore. Nice. I hope that shelter just got a bunch of new utensils. Kudos to you for giving your grandmother a taste of her own bitter medicine. I probably would never have the balls to do that, probably because my grandmother is one of my favorite people. I'm sorry you had to put up with her bullshit. Thank you. I would not have done that to my grandmother either, but then my grandmother would not have done that to me. This grandmother absolutely deserved it and it sounds like it was long overdue. That lesson was certainly learned too late in her life to make any real difference and she might have mellowed if she had received that slapdown years earlier. The Grand Monster nearly killed me. But seriously, who needs so many pans or kitchen utensils? It sounds like your grandmother was addicted to getting new stuff and didn't care about others. That's how hoarders think. They could have a house packed full of stuff, but they'll keep buying clothes, appliances, etc. from home shopping network or websites. Stuff they never use, and often never even take out of the box. I bet that was one of the best feeling in the entire world. You did the right thing, BTW. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.